Yeah. Hello, I'm here with Theresa Ritta Olson, and she is presently a ESL specialist working at ESU 10 here in Kearney. But she's a student of mine from years ago when I was about 18 years old. um, but she has extensive experience, and you've taught. Where have you taught? You've taught several places.
I've just taught two. I taught in Crete for a year and a half, and then I taught in Lexington at the high school for 12 years.
12 years at Lexington High School. And as some of you may know, if you're from out of state in this class, Lexington is one of the largest, certainly by percentage, ELL concentrations probably in the country, but certainly for just a normal high school in the rural area part of the country. Lexington has a big meatpacking plant, which kind of explains the diversity, but not all of it. It's also a refugee center, settlement area, and there are a large number of people from Somalia, mainly Somalia. There may be a few others there too. So, Theresa, let's start out. How did you get into ESL?
I just had decided when I came to college that I was going to do Spanish, was definitely one of my endorsements that I wanted to get. And I started out thinking business was the other one, but the classes were not my favorite. I kind of got bored by them.
Yeah,
so
I could see that.
I changed. I found ESL and I figured it went well with Spanish. So I was lucky enough to start from the ground up and got my endorsement there.
Okay. Now, you started out at Crete, which is another ELL area, and they have that's near Lincoln, Nebraska. For those of you from outside of Nebraska, what did you teach at first? I mean, when you got into ESL, because a lot of times people don't. It's not like there's a career path and you teach a certain class. It's a K-12 endorsement in Nebraska, and so you may end up in all kinds of situations. So,
and it was a really odd situation too, because I had actually got hired in January of that year. I had just graduated in December with my degree, and I got hired in a new position that they created based on need. And I was actually teaching a young adult class in the morning at the central office. I was working with 16 to 21-year-olds. I was 22 at the time, 16 and 21-year-olds that had no English and wanted to also be able to work. So they went to school from 8 to noon. And in the afternoon, then I went up and taught middle school science, language arts. I think it was language arts. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. And PE. I co-taught PE.
Okay. So you co-taught PE?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was an eye-opening experience. I realized that PE was not an area I ever wanted to teach it.
Okay. And then after a year and a half, you took a position at Lex for 12 years.
Yep.
And how was that? I mean, how did you get to Lex?
Well, I followed my husband. My now husband was here in Kearney, so I wanted to get back to the area. And I got offered a job at Lex, and I was working with two other ESL teachers at the high school. For 7 years there, I taught sheltered instruction. I taught mainly like social studies and language arts were my big ones. I also taught a math class. And then I got my reading master's degree, and I ended up teaching a reading class that was a mixture of special ed, ELL, and other mainstream students in reading at the high school level.
Okay, so struggling readers, one type or another.
Yep.
Okay.
All of them below grade level.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So you taught reading and Lexington. What was your impression? And I know we always have to be careful what we say, but just in dealing with Lexington, what were the teaching conditions like? I mean, how was the program set up?
Well,
over time, I know it should probably change some. So.
It did, and I feel like, and this from my experience now, I really do feel like, as an ELL teacher, we kind of hold the responsibility for the ELL students. When teachers think that when they leave our class that they're now fluent and they don't have to provide supports anymore, so you do become kind of the link for the kids to their
Okay.
education.
You're the advocate.
The advocate,
And
yes.
you're also responsible for everything that happens.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
Okay. I told my class, or I have, or will, or now will, is that sometimes you run into people saying, "Oh, they're your students. They're not our students because we're not ESL teachers." So.
No, I remember we did some monitoring, because when you have students that have exited the program, you have to monitor them for now it's 4 years. It's going to be 4 years now. But I remember working with other teachers. We were all having to do these monitoring forms, which are very difficult at the high school level to do. And I'd have teachers say, "Well, I don't have any EL students in my class. I don't need to do this." You work in a school that is majority Hispanic.
Yeah.
A lot of your students are, if they've not been exited, they're either in the program or have been exited from the program, so they still need supports.
Yeah. How do you establish a good relationship with peer teachers? Now, I realize that Lex had a lot of other ESL teachers,
Yes.
but how do you go about, what's one of the ways to work with teachers that you want to enlighten them and get their positive participation helping students? How do you go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on everybody's personality too, and how because establishing a relationship with other people is an important part of teaching, and collaboration is so essential. So if you really want to start establishing a good relationship with other teachers, I suggest showing your support, giving them suggestion upon suggestion upon suggestion, being willing to come in and work with them in their class, if possible. I know everybody's time becomes a big issue, but just being there, letting them know that you can support them as they help your students in their class.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I don't know as much, because I teach at the college level, and how do you go about getting good materials for your students? I know obviously we have catalogs and things that we can get, high interest, low reading level books. But do you have any particular companies or programs that you happen to like that you think work well with students?
And materials are the hardest piece. I think the hardest piece about ELL, especially depending elementary level, it's a little more. It's not as complicated to get materials because they're closer to their grade level. My favorite company right now is EL Achieve. They're a group out of California.
And they're called what now?
EL Achieve.
EL Achieve. Okay.
They have, and if a district is going to, like, I use it with my consortium. So I pay for it, and I have 14 schools that have opportunities to access these materials because it's an expensive program. It's not something that you can just go and buy for.
And this is where the ESU helps.
Yes. This is, and depending, because like Lexington would not be able to help, is not part of what I do because they're too big of a school. I work with schools that have like 10 to 100 students maybe.
Okay.
So it's much smaller. But they have an elementary curriculum. They're working on a secondary curriculum for pullout language acquisition. And they also have a constructing meaning, which is supposed to be for like your mainstream teachers to be able to incorporate some more language supports within their classrooms.
Okay. Now, just for those of you that may not be aware, ESU 10 stands for Educational Service Unit, and we have about 22 of these in Nebraska.
It's less than that. I think the highest number is 19, but we have a few that don't exist anymore. So I'm thinking we're around there's around 17 of us.
Okay, and it's basically in Nebraska. Is this unique to Nebraska?
There are other states that have similar units like what we do.
Okay.
But yeah, our system is very unique in the way that we are very hands-on with our schools.
Okay. So depending on where you are, I know some of you are in Northeast New Jersey, you have to look at your local area to see what kind of support you get from the state. But it's really cool in Nebraska because it happens that for a long time there have been ESL English second language, bilingual people, etc., working at these service units. And a service unit will serve, depending on the size of the county, but may serve several counties, or it may serve just one or part of a county if it's in Omaha or something. But those are really cool. The thing about the materials is what I don't have the knowledge of, because that'd be cool if you were teaching some of these classes sometime, just
put that out there.
Yeah, I'll put that out there, because, I get tired being the only person in the band playing all the time. So,
well, and I'm actually now a certified instructor. Well, close. I'm going to soon be able to teach the whole curriculum on my own.
Okay.
So I'm getting close to that part.
There's the curriculum of
the systematic ELD, which is the elementary curriculum for pullout. I'll be close to teaching that, but I can, at this point, I am allowed to talk about this curriculum.
Okay. Now you mentioned the pullout, and I think I've sent some material out, or I will, about different types of programs, because I'm really cramming a lot in for the 4 weeks of this class. And I may share this with the multicultural ed class, because some of you deal with ESL situations, and this will just be a nice little, it'll beat Jimmy Kimmel, I know. May not beat Colbert at night, but I'll see what the ratings are.
You said no jokes.
I'm sorry. Yeah. You didn't laugh anyhow, like you don't laugh at anything else. So, what I'm thinking about now, see, that's why the jokes are no good, because I forget things. What kind of programs? I know I talked about a little bit, or you will hear about pull out, push in, and sheltered workshop, which is our textbook for the 899 class. Those are the dominant ones.
And the new one that's really coming up is the bilingual.
Okay.
Where you have dual language happening at the same time, where students are learning language and content in the same setting, whether they are English as their primary language or another.
And that's partially because it gives support to the first language. Of course, we're really talking Spanish here, because we don't do Arabic. So
it depends on your population.
Yeah, it depends. If you could do dual language if you have a large number of certain group people in. I would say that the pullout is the most earliest one that we know of, that started when Nebraska thought that ESL was. I always have this joke, which is not funny anymore, like most of them, but Des Moines, Iowa, probably 40 years ago, started their ESL program. And it was a temporary program to help the schools adjust to a recent influx of non-English speakers. And I remember they were celebrating and this has been years ago, so now they're probably celebrating the 40th anniversary of their temporary program. Gives you an idea of how people didn't anticipate that. And ESL, when I went into it, you just assumed you went overseas to teach, because we don't need to teach English in America. Everybody speaks it. Ta-da. So the pullout is one of the earliest programs, and then we progress to what other programs?
Well, shelter would probably be the other one.
Shelter
would be the next step, and then push in came after. I think that where we really wanted to, and it depends on, I think, needs, size of school, staffing, because pullout is really great for elementary, because we want the students to be with their grade level as much as possible, and the discrepancy between language level and their grade level is a lot smaller. So pullout's a great one for that. You
want young kids to be exposed to language as much as possible, and but with older kids, they because of a lot of factors, the academics are much tougher, and students come in and their language acquisition speed is much slower.
Well,
it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, actually, they've done studies, and that the idea that kids learn language quicker than older students and adults is mainly because their language at the young age is less sophisticated.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to learn less sophisticated language. And the problem that we've seen is that we try to move these kids on without the supports past like the age of third grade, and we see them kind of plateau in their language,
right?
Because we think, oh, they can speak English, we don't need to support them anymore. And so we still need to support our kids, especially our ELLs at that young age.
It's a little bit from that chart, which is really antique, but we used to be that you supposedly get basic interpersonal communication skills in 2 years, and then academic skills take longer, but that really varies, but it's going to take much longer. And that's something that, as you mentioned, Theresa, the support for academic language is, you can't assume because someone seems to speak English that they now can read and write in English. If that were true, everyone who learned English would be an excellent writer, and we know that that's not true. So that's kind of interesting. What else do you see? Now, you mentioned dual language, and I know Lexington has a dual language program.
And Omaha too.
And Omaha does too. They're kind of the exception, but they take care of all. One thing I like about it in Lexington is that there were a lot of non-Spanish speakers that wanted their kids to be in dual language, because you do much better, and there are a lot of research promoting it. But if you are fluent and can read and write, literate in 2 languages, your ability to get good jobs and certainly to make more money is dramatically increased. And it used to be a long time ago that speaking 2 languages and reading and writing another language was just assumed among more elite people. You would study French or you'd study Latin in the old days. And certainly if you could read and write in French, like our constitutional, the people wrote our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, of course they could go to France and speak French. It wasn't easy, but they did it. But now it's, people almost look at you like you're a magic act if you can speak in 3 languages. They just look at you and say, "Oh my gosh, he speaks French," or you can switch to Spanish and English. This is not unusual in Europe and many other places in the world, but with Americans, we are just so behind a lot of us, in terms of our attitude towards second language. I always go back to the old high school Spanish class that maybe didn't go off so well. So.
Well, it makes me just think of, even because I speak some Spanish, but my Spanish is not, I'm nowhere near where I used to be, mainly because I've stopped using it as much. But it's people that don't know a second language think, oh, you speak Spanish, you're fluent. Like, it's not, language is not that well defined. It's on a spectrum.
Yeah, you can learn enough Italian going over to Italy that you can amaze people like you're some magic act or something. But all you have to do is speak 4 sentences or something, and people think you're an expert. Trying to think what other things. What do you foresee changes now? We know that immigration may have slowed down, but immigrants are second and third generation kids. What do you see going on there? The challenges is maybe not. Is it ESL? Is it other aspects of, this gets a little bit outside the ESL, but when you get cross-cultural, my other class I'm teaching is 804 is multicultural. And what do you see in second and third generation kids? Do you see any?
No, you see them adapting. The second and third generations, we're seeing students that look like they're Hispanic but don't speak Spanish anymore.
Right.
We're seeing some changes between family dynamics where they no longer have a good like they don't have a decent relationship with their parents, mainly because
grandparents,
because of the changes that have happened with their culture. They're becoming bicultural, where their families are still only mono.
Yeah. One of the things they do in some schools, they teach heritage Spanish. And of course, I keep mentioning Spanish because that's the dominant language in our area. even if we have Arabic or speakers of
Karen is actually
Karen is
the second biggest in the state.
Second biggest language in the state is Karen. Karen.
Like Karen.
Looks like Karen, but it's called.
The people are called Karen or Karenis.
And they're from Burma.
They're
Myanmar.
They're
refugees.
Refugees. They're being killed in Burma by the Burman. So they don't like to be called Burman. Or from Burma.
Right.
They're Karen from Burma. That's how you want.
And we don't have many Karen in where I'm from, but are there any?
Omaha and Lincoln are the biggest.
Omaha and Lincoln have a large population of Karen.
Cozad actually has it.
And Cozad
has a small population of Karenis.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep.
So the one thing I like about ESL is you never know where it's going to pop up. And the person who has that endorsement suddenly becomes very necessary because I don't know. Over the years, I've seen people just panic when they say, "Oh my gosh," if you speak Spanish, you're almost some kind of a super guy to them. But if you just have an ESL endorsement, they suddenly run and say, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do?" And you have to do a lot of what I call intercultural counseling to bring people together and help them realize that there's a balance. We're not all the same, but we're not all different either. That you need to open up the avenues of communication so you can work with the parents, and you can communicate a lot with people even if you have very little limited language that you can use with them. Generally positive, friendly, nonverbal behavior is really useful, and all kinds of things like that. Signage, making sure that if you have certainly enough students now, Lexington has signs in, is it Somali? What do they call that language?
Yeah, Somali.
It's Somali. So they actually have signs in English, Spanish, and Somali for like the bathroom and who the director of the school, the principal, el director, isn't it the principal in Spanish? And so that there are all kinds of small, subtle, but if you're not used to them, you notice indications of how to deal with another culture or different cultures. So I always recommend to people, if you're an ESL teacher, you're also intercultural because you deal with all kinds of cultures. And anything else you want to add?
Well, I just say that what you're saying there is a really good point, because when I go to a school that has never had ESL students before, because I get these 911 calls, I like to call them, like, we just got a family, we don't know what to do. One of the first things I will tell them, besides the being compliant with the law, we'll say, look at your staff who has an ESL degree. That's where your person you need to start talking to and working with. So you become that direct link for the family. And people get really scared. As educators, we are very good at using our language to communicate. And when we can't use that, it makes us uncomfortable sometimes. So you'll find that principals and other teachers become uncomfortable with a student that might just sit there and be quiet because they don't know how to communicate. They don't know what to do with them. So to help anybody understand that you can still communicate, like Dr. Tracy was saying, you don't always have to use words. There are other things you can do to communicate. Okay.
Well, I want to thank you. I'm sure we could talk all afternoon. I know you all love watching me, especially that 40-minute one. I got a little confused. Too long. So I'm going to post this, and I'll probably post this for the 804 class, because I think you can't talk intercultural or cross-cultural or any of that without getting into ESL very quickly. When I was a kid, the only time I saw an international person or a non-English speaker was almost always when we had an exchange student. And I remember them from Indonesia and places. And when I was a little kid, all I cared about, what kind of monsters do they have in their jungle? I just assumed everybody has monsters in somewhere living in their country, and they're going to come get us. So I was a little crazy then. So, well, thank you, Theresa. I appreciate it. And she is at ESU 10. So
if you need anything, ESU10.org, you can go on there and just, even if you just search Title III, you'll be able to find my name, and you can contact me with if you have any other questions about Title III ESL.
And you should have similar resources in your state or in your part of the state. So if they're over in Omaha or Lincoln.
Yeah, I can. ESU in the Omaha OPS deals with their own. They have their own Title III person, so they'd have to find that person in there. But if you're Omaha area, ESU 3, if that is your ESU, they have a Title III consortium as well. So you can contact ESU 3 and they can get you connected with those people as well.
All right. Well, thank you. And I'll put this in the hopper along with the other dozens of recordings I've been doing. So